In this video, you'll uncover 4 ancient techniques, real methods used for centuries in Tibetan monasteries that don't rely on breathing, mindfulness, or modern mental hacks. These are rituals designed to interrupt overthinking in seconds, even in moments of fear, chaos, or emotional overload. And they work because they attack the mind before the mind takes control. But the most powerful method monks use isn't physical, and it isn't silent. It's a sound that stops overthinking instantly, and almost no one outside the monasteries has ever heard it. When most people feel their mind spiraling, they try to calm down with ideas, relax, breathe, don't think about it. Monks take the opposite approach. They go straight to the body. Their goal isn't to soothe the mind, it's to interrupt it. In several Tibetan training traditions, especially among young novices, instructors teach what they call cutting the moment. It means stopping the thought right at the moment it sparks, not minutes later when it's already running. The simplest tool they use is something almost invisible, rubbing the thumb against the nail of the index finger in a tiny rhythmic motion. Some monasteries call this practice nyaluk, loosely translated as rubbing the karma. It isn't mystical, it's sensory. That tiny scrape of nail against skin sends a brief, almost electric tactile signal up the nervous system. It's enough to bring attention back from the noise inside the head to the physical world right in front of you. And because the movement is so small, nobody around you ever notices. A monk could be in debate practice, in a crowded prayer hall, or even sweeping the courtyard and use it without breaking flow. The point is simple: a wandering mind can be recalled in milliseconds if you give it a sharp, clear anchor. Another method is even more discreet, shifting the angle of the neck by just 1 centimeter. Not a stretch, not a roll, not a full posture change, just a tiny tilt. In Tibetan traditions that train physical awareness, small postural adjustments are believed to influence mental rhythm. When the chin moves slightly, the balance of the upper spine changes, and with it the pattern of breath and attention. It's a micro-reset. Anyone who has been stuck staring at a screen for too long might notice something similar. The moment you adjust your head position, the spell of overthinking breaks for a second. Monks simply use that as a tool, intentionally and repeatedly. It's the minimum movement needed to interrupt rumination without creating a whole new chain of thoughts. A third physical technique is tapping the sternum lightly with 2 fingers. In some monastic routines, especially when young monks prepare for long recitations, they do 3 soft taps on the center of the chest. The vibration travels through the ribs and creates a small internal echo that disrupts looping thoughts. This isn't about emotion or heart energy, it's about resetting the body's sense of internal space. The chest is one of the quickest places where tension accumulates during stress or overthinking. That tiny tap reminds the nervous system to shift out of the mental spiral and back into the present. In everyday life, you may have done similar things without realizing it. People tap their foot, adjust their collar, touch their forehead, or straighten their back when they're overwhelmed. Those are accidental resets, untrained versions of the same mechanism. What monks do is refine that instinct into a precise skill. They use the smallest possible physical cue to break the first link in a chain of thought. And once the chain is broken, the next thought doesn't automatically appear. What makes these physical methods effective is their timing. They're not meant to be used after the mind is already racing. They're used at the first flicker, the moment when a thought begins to form. Over time, monks become very good at detecting that moment. Some describe it as a spark, others as a tilt of the mind, others as a shift in the body. Whatever the description, they respond to it instantly with one of these micro-movements. Instead of letting the spark become a flame, they snuff it out right away. A senior monk once explained it in simple terms. A thought grows because you let it take the second step. If you cut the first step, there is no second. The physical microshock is the knife that cuts that first step. These habits are quiet, subtle, and incredibly practical. They don't require sitting down, closing your eyes, or retreating from life. They're made for moments when the mind slips while walking, talking, working, or facing something stressful. They're tools that let monks stay present without needing long rituals or meditation sessions. But these body-based techniques are just the beginning. They are the first line of defense, the quickest and smallest ways to reset the mind. The deeper question is, what happens when the environment itself becomes part of the technique? What if the architecture, the direction you face, or even a doorway can reset your thoughts the moment you walk through it? That's where the next set of methods begins. When people think about stopping overthinking, they picture internal strategies, breathing, journaling, meditation. But monasteries across the Himalayas were designed with a different logic. The environment isn't just a backdrop, it's part of the training. Walls, thresholds, courtyards, and even the direction a monk faces all play a role in shaping attention. In some traditions, the space is considered a partner in mental discipline. The goal is simple: make it easier for the mind to reset by changing something outside the mind. The first example of this is what some teachers call the ritual of the threshold. It looks extremely simple. A monk walks toward a doorway, slows down, and crosses it with deliberate slowness. But symbolically, the doorway is a dividing line between two mental states. In many monasteries, novices are taught that each threshold represents a change of mind. When you pass through it, you leave the previous thought behind, almost the way you leave dust outside before entering a prayer hall. It's a habit that creates dozens of tiny resets throughout the day. Every time a monk steps from his sleeping cell to the corridor, or from the courtyard into the kitchen, he gets a clean slate. Overthinking struggles to survive when every doorway becomes a mental reset button. Another environmental method involves turning the body toward open space, toward a valley, a wide sky, or the horizon. This idea appears in several Himalayan traditions. When your mind becomes too verbal or too tight, you face emptiness. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Even the opening between two mountains can create that sense of spaciousness. The brain reacts to wide open space by relaxing the internal monologue. In psychological research, spacious visual fields tend to reduce internal chatter because the mind instinctively expands its attention outward. Monks simply make this a habit. When thoughts start looping, they turn toward the largest empty direction available. It's like giving the mind a gust of fresh air. The verbal thinking collapses because the visual field takes over. A third technique is far more intense, though practiced in a controlled way: sitting near cold running water. Not bathing in it, that would be too distracting, but sitting close enough that the cold air and the sound of moving water create what some monks call a cold cut. The temperature drop triggers a sharp sensory presence. Cold has a way of grabbing attention quickly. Anyone who has touched snow with bare hands knows the effect. But in monastic settings, the goal isn't endurance, it's interruption. The cold stream, the echo of water against rocks, and the crisp air create a combined stimulus that breaks mental loops instantly. It's a cognitive shock delivered by nature itself. These environmental techniques share a common principle: change the context and the mind must recalibrate. Overthinking relies on sameness, the same posture, the same room, the same mental path. When you cross a threshold intentionally, or face open space, or step into cold air, the continuity breaks. There's a moment of reorientation when the mind must let go of whatever it was holding. In daily life, you may have experienced something similar. Walking from your bedroom to the kitchen can make a worrying thought disappear. Looking out a window can clear the mind for a moment. Stepping outside into cold air can snap you out of rumination. Monks use these moments intentionally, frequently, and with full awareness. They turn ordinary surroundings into a mental reset tool. Some monasteries were built with this in mind. Certain doorways are lower, making people bow slightly as they enter, another reset. Courtyards are placed so that the first thing you see upon stepping out is open sky, a deliberate pause for the mind. Even the layout of walkways encourages slow transitions instead of rushed movement. These spaces are quiet, but they work constantly on the mind. The key idea is that the environment can interrupt thought faster than the mind can interrupt itself. Instead of trying to force calm internally, monks let the world do part of the work. But as powerful as these spatial techniques are, they're still external. They rely on space, temperature, movement, all things outside the body. The next level goes deeper. It involves breath, but not in the soft meditative way most people expect. These are breathing patterns meant to scramble the rhythm of thought itself. And that's where we go next, into the most unconventional breathing methods monks use to silence the mind without meditating. When people hear breathing techniques, they think of meditation apps, slow inhales, peaceful music, or long exhalations meant to relax the body. But in several Tibetan traditions, breath isn't used to soothe the mind, it's used to interrupt it. Monks treat breath like a tool for breaking rhythm, because thought itself has rhythm. When you change the pattern of breathing suddenly, you disrupt the internal pacing that makes overthinking feel like a runaway train. The first method is called the split exhalation, or trill lung in some lineages. It's simple but surprisingly difficult to do without awareness. Instead of one smooth exhale, monks release the air in 3 microbursts with tiny pauses in between. The effect is immediate. The brain expects a steady cycle, like a sentence with a beginning and an end. When you break that cycle, the mind can't maintain the storyline it was building. A monk in training once described it like cutting a rope into pieces so it cannot pull you anymore. The exhale becomes 3 small cuts, each one breaking the continuity of the thought. Anyone who tries this will notice the same thing. It becomes almost impossible to keep a rumination going while controlling the breath in such a precise, irregular way. Another technique is even stranger: The endless inhalation. Monks inhale as if they're going to keep inhaling forever. A long, gentle pull of air that doesn't have a defined endpoint. They stop only when the body naturally insists on exhaling. This creates a temporary suspension inside the mind. Thoughts depend on markers, beginnings, endings, punctuation. When you inhale without a clear end, the inner monologue loses its timing. It's like trying to speak while walking on stairs that suddenly have no spacing. The mind stumbles. For a moment, the chain of thoughts weakens, and the internal narrator quiets. Some practitioners describe this as a soft trance, not because it's mystical, but because awareness shifts away from words and towards sensation. A third breathing method is rare and taught mostly to wandering practitioners: reverse breathing. In this pattern, the inhale expands the abdomen while the exhale collapses the chest, the opposite of how most people breathe. This inversion disrupts habitual energy channels, according to traditional explanations, but there's also a practical effect. The nervous system can't rely on its automatic patterns, so internal chatter drops. It's like switching the dominant hand. It forces the brain to pay attention. Monks who travel alone, especially in older traditions, used this method when walking long distances. Every time overthinking appeared, they would switch to the inverted breath for a few cycles. The novelty of the movement resets awareness quickly. These breathing patterns aren't for relaxation, they're for precision. The idea is that thought and breath are linked through rhythm. If you change the rhythm sharply, you break the thought. This goes against the modern idea that breath should always be smooth and calm. Monks aren't using breath to find peace. They're using breath to interrupt momentum. Once the mind stops its rush, calmness arrives by itself. You've likely felt versions of this. If you've ever gasped suddenly, or held your breath for a moment while concentrating, or released air in small bursts when overwhelmed, you were using an instinctive form of rhythm interruption. Tibetan practitioners simply train those instincts into deliberate techniques. Instead of waiting for the body to react automatically, they learn to use breath intentionally to stop the mind from racing. The interesting thing is that none of these methods require formal meditation. You don't need a quiet room, you don't need to sit cross-legged, you don't even need more than a few seconds. These are in-the-moment breakers, tools monks use while walking, working, or chanting. They're designed for real life, not special settings. Still, breath is physical. It's a body-based tool. And while these techniques are powerful, some monks train in something even more radical, using the mind to stop itself. No body, no environment, no breath. Just pure cognition, bending back on cognition. This final set of methods is the most advanced, the most counterintuitive, and the most mentally demanding. It's where thought destroys thought by its own structure. And that's where we go next. Up to this point, every method relied on something outside the thought itself: a touch, a doorway, a breath. But in the higher levels of monastic training, especially in philosophical colleges and solitary retreats, monks learn something far more subtle, using one thought to dismantle the next. No body cues, no environmental triggers, just pure cognitive skill. These practices can sound abstract, but in reality they're incredibly practical. They teach the mind to stop believing its own voice. The first technique is sometimes called the ghost thought, or dreidwo. It works like this. The monk deliberately creates a simple, meaningless thought, something like red dot or small stone. The thought appears and then fades. The monk repeats the process over and over, watching the thought rise and dissolve. After enough repetitions, something important happens. The brain realizes that all thoughts appear and disappear on their own. The internal narrative stops feeling solid. The mind begins to see thoughts as events, not truths. For people who overthink, this is a radical insight. A looping thought only feels powerful because you believe it. When you produce short, harmless thoughts intentionally, you reveal that the mind can generate and release them just as easily. The looping pattern weakens. The third technique is the most advanced and the hardest to describe simply: the gaze of the unnamed observer. This practice teaches monks to look at their thoughts as if they belong to someone else. Instead of saying, "I'm thinking this," the mind shifts into "a thought is happening." It sounds subtle, but the effect is powerful. When you stop identifying with a thought, it loses its grip immediately. In modern psychology, something similar appears in cognitive diffusion techniques, where you learn to see thoughts as mental events rather than facts. Monks have trained this for centuries. Some even practice short exercises where they imagine watching their own mind from behind their shoulders, not as a mystical experience but as a cognitive trick to gain distance. The result is that thoughts feel like background noise instead of commands. The breathing techniques add the next layer: not meditation, interruption, split exhalations, endless inhales, reverse breathing. Each one disrupts the rhythm that thoughts depend on. These methods remind us that breath isn't only for calming down, it can also be used to stop mental momentum instantly. A few seconds of altered breathing can do more than a long session of trying to relax. And finally, the most advanced tools take place entirely in the mind. Ghost thoughts, incomplete words, the observer's gaze. These practices teach monks to see thinking as a passing event, not as an identity. When you stop believing every thought is yours, it becomes harder for overthinking to take hold. The inner narrator loses authority, and silence appears naturally. All four layers work together: body, environment, breath, and cognition. Monks don't chase quiet. They create conditions where quiet becomes the natural outcome. They don't wait for calm, they cut the chain early before it becomes noise. For modern life, the takeaway is simple. You don't need a cave or a monastery. You just need small, consistent interruptions, a reset in the body, a pause in the breath, a shift in the environment, a moment of watching the thought instead of following it. The monk's lesson is clear. The mind doesn't have to run. It runs because we let it. Interrupt the first step, and the rest never begins.